Great evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I am Moses T. Alexander Green, and I am the Director of Performing Arts and Film here at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and I'd like to welcome each of you. I always say that I have the best vocation in the world. I get a chance to reimagine what's possible in terms of dance, theater, music, film, literary arts programming at an American museum. And I also get a chance to bring North Carolinians the best. And when I think about, I like that. And when I think of programming like tonight, I know that I have given the best. And let me tell you why. It's not because of me. So tonight, in celebration of North Carolina native and jazz icon Nina Simone, who would have been 90 years old today, you have been invited to a special event. It is an evening of scholarship and discourse and song. It begins with National Humanities Center Fellow Dr. Jason Miller. Dr. Miller will lecture on Mpoet Langston Hughes' impact on establishing Nina Simone's reputation and forever shaping her image as the High Priestess of Soul. Then the discussion will be moderated by North Carolina's Poet Laureate, our very own Jaki, Shelton Green. And then we will have a performance of some of Nina Simone's classics. Now, I've got to say, I love music, and I know our vocalist personally. I consider her a dear friend, but from last night's sound check, and she doesn't know I'm saying this to her, I have never heard her sound more soulful and more expressive than I heard last night. And so I know that you all are in for a treat. So who am I speaking of? I'm speaking of Sandra Dubose. I am also speaking of, accompanying her tonight are two wonderful individuals. The first is the museum's first composer, artist in resident. That is Carolyn Colquitt. And then I have to make my voice deep for this, and we have Mr. Des Callis. And so before we go into tonight, I do want to share with you some other programming that I have been honored to curate. Hopefully each of you received one of our promotional materials outside. First, because of you, jazz is alive at the NCMA, and we are blessed to give you, we are honored to give you 9 Grammy winners and 2 Grammy-nominated persons for our 2023 Jazz at the NCMA series. Thursday, June 1st, Kirk Whalum and Shantae Moore. Thursday, June 8th, Layla Hathaway and PJ Morton. Thursday, June 22nd, Robert Glasper, and if I never do anything right again in my life, getting her and signing her to before she won those 2 Grammys, I know I did well. We have Samara Joy, who was just named Best New Artist at the Grammys. On Thursday, June 29th, we have Sheila E., the Queen of Percussion, and 8-time Latin jazz legend Eddie Palmieri and the Latin Jazz Band. We have an evening with Kenny G on July 13th. I'm earning my salary. And then we end on Thursday, July 20th with an evening with Take 6 and Chrisette Michelle. So before I bring Dr. Miller up, I do want to say it is our honor to bring you the best in programming. And before he ascends to the stage, I'd like to just take a moment to pause and to reflect and to remember Nina Simone. Let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Jason Miller, his research interests include 20th century American poetry, American literature, literary theory, and pedagogy. An overview of his research appears as a 10-page cover story at NC State in their NC State magazine. His latest digital project is Backlash Blues, Nina Simone and Langston Hughes. And I am telling you, we are getting an inside peek into that work. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. W. Jason Miller.
What a delight and a pleasure to be here this evening. Thank you for making time in your schedule to be here. Greetings. We have so many stars tonight that it's hard to know where to begin. Sandra, Carolyn, Jaki, and you may not know it, but this may be the greatest collection ever of intelligence and scholarship ever assembled in this room. Not because I'm here. We have at least 14 fellows at the National Humanities Center that have made the drive over from Durham. Among them include people who are world experts in philosophy of place, color, public history, the leading expert probably in the world on Black opera, folks on Jane Austen, artists all around the world. Would you please help me in honoring their incredible scholarship very quickly? If there's anything you like about tonight, it probably resulted from one of the conversations we had. The National Humanities Center is an amazing place in which I've been privileged to do much of this research and scholarship. Now, why are we all here? Not just because Nina Simone is amazing, but also because Langston Hughes is this cool. Many of you know Langston Hughes so well. In case you don't, you actually do. He asked the world, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun or fester like a sore and then run? That became the title of Lorraine Hansberry's March 11th, 1959 play, A Raisin in the Sun. The space between my fingers, that takes up the entire output of Robert Frost's entire poetic career, including 2 plays, A Mask of Reason and A Mask of Mercy. When Langston Hughes died in 1967, he had his name on 58 books. That does not include 19 plays, 5 of which ran on Broadway, and it does not include a 22-year run of a weekly article that ran nationally in the Chicago Defender, nor does it include the amount of mentoring he did. Born in 1901, died in 1967, he was very close friends with a person we all know, and yet always wish we knew a little bit better. Isn't that true? Nina is a person we always wish we knew just a little bit better. This is Nina Simone. What does Nina Simone mean to North Carolina? North Carolina has a long, rich history in the civil rights movement. We know that the sit-in movement started in Greensboro February 1st, 1960. We know that Ella Baker's great project, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, was founded in April later that year in Shaw University. We know that Dr. King's first ever I Have a Dream speech was delivered in Rocky Mount. We know that Floyd McKissick has a long history in Durham, on and on and on. We also know that North Carolina has amazing musicians. Those include, but are not limited to, great names like Thelonious Monk, John Coltrane, even Roberta Flack. Nina Simone combines both those worlds, civil rights movement with the music of North Carolina. Born in Tryon, North Carolina, raised in that area and then educated at Asheville as a high school student, she is North Carolina's own, and we claim her proudly, and she teaches us a great deal. Now, I'm here to tell you that we're here for a birthday celebration, and so if you're going to celebrate something, I can't think of anything much better than friendship. This is what I'm talking about when I say these two were friends. On October 9th, 1960, Langston Hughes invited Nina Simone over to his house for a raccoon cooking. Now, if you're ever lucky enough to get a Langston Hughes autograph, you know it's going to be in Super Show green ink. And so he wrote in the very bottom that Nina Simone had been invited. This is Langston Hughes sitting next to Nina over at a house at Mount Vernon sharing wine. They were social friends. More than that, Langston Hughes did very personal things for Nina Simone. When she was married to Andy Stroud on December 4th, 1961, Langston Hughes, thank you, Cedric, used a luncheon at the White House with John F. Kennedy to secure, are you ready? A honeymoon for Nina, sponsored by the CIA. There's a group known as AMSAC, the American Society for African Culture, and they wanted to send jazz musicians to Nigeria as a cultural exchange to show the continent what America had to offer by way of capitalism as opposed to communism. So Hughes said, weren't you just married, Nina? And 9 days later, he got her on that flight to perform with 33 other artists, including people like Randy Weston and Lionel Hampton. This is Langston Hughes standing next to Nina and her brand new husband / manager, Andy Stroud. And this is the bus ride, and this is straight from the scrapbooks, and so that's why we have a little bit of fuzz in the color. Langston sitting right behind Nina. She sits by her guitarist, Al Shackman, and then, of course, Nina's new husband behind. But the thing that separates Langston Hughes from all the other people in Nina's orbit is that Langston Hughes also helped Nina professionally. On the far left, you're looking at a copy of an issue of Langston Hughes and the Chicago Defender entitled Spotlight on Nina Simone. It was first published November 12, 1960. Langston Hughes took an entire article, something he never did, devoted to Nina Simone, showing how she's different from Billie Holiday and showing how she's spectacularly unique. That article was republished in the New York Post in 1962. It ended up on the back of Broadway Ballads Blues in 1964. And the copy you're looking at on the left, that was used when Andy said, Nina, I think you're big enough to make an appearance at Carnegie Hall. Carnegie Hall had not been calling on Langston. Andy and Nina moved all their chips to the center of the table. They said, if we hire a promoter and we do this right, we can do this. Why did Andy have so much confidence? Well, not only did he have Nina Simone, but he had an H up his sleeve. And so in all the promotions for that event, Nina's had Langston Hughes' summary of her work advertised on posters and bulletins. And so when people saw the ad, she had the endorsement of Langston Hughes to go along with it. Her amazing talent, her skills, and that endorsement. So that professional aspect is what separates Langston Hughes from great contributors to her life that include, but are not limited, people like Lorraine Hansberry and James Baldwin. A brief overview of these two will help us get our bearings straight together before we move on to some detailed ideas and images. Isn't it amazing how often in life we realize that memory tricks us? Memory sometimes can be as difficult as trying to match horseshoes to hoofprints. How is it that we can also spend so much time shooting air balloons from the air and yet have trouble teaching American Studies courses on the ground? We're here for several reasons, but one of those reasons is because we often don't have stories like this in the center of our curriculums about our American narrative. Make no mistake, the two people we're devoting our time to tonight are American icons. This is a brief overview to just get us settled and then lead us into our discussion a little bit later. Now, you might think from what I told you before that all this starts in 1960, but you'd be dead wrong, and I know many of you in this room know this. Langston actually met Nina in 1949. Of course, at that time, she was Eunice Wayman. She was 16 years old on the right, and she had personally helped invite Langston Hughes to come speak at Allen High School in Asheville. And Langston Hughes spent that week before we had Black History Month traveling all across North Carolina, ending up in Washington, D.C., and then on to Boston. Now, this picture on the left, when Langston Hughes walked into Winston-Salem, okay, there was a room that could seat 100 people, yet 600 people were at the door. So he spent the next 5 hours doing 15-minute relays to get everyone through and out that door speaking. Nina Simone, I was delighted to find out in my research, actually introduced Langston Hughes the day he appeared in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a spectacular connection. So their story begins then. It continues in 1960 when Langston Hughes is a board member of the Newport Jazz Festival and invites Nina to perform. She performs on the opening night, and she has that wonderful record many of you know, Nina at Newport. But what I'm fascinated in is I had an amazing student a number of years ago locate and realize that Nina not only performed, but most importantly for us tonight, and this is brand new, she actually watched Langston Hughes from the stage as he presented a blues program that featured people like Muddy Waters and Johnny Lee Hooker. And he was telling stories about Father of the Blues, W.C. Handy. So this is Nina watching Langston Hughes on the stage be an expert of blues music. How did that session end? Oh, it was fairly memorable. It was the first time that white audiences had had a chance to see black blues musicians. And so a riot occurred. People couldn't get in. And Langston Hughes closed down the entire Newport Jazz Festival by actually writing on a Western Union telegram a song called Goodbye Newport Blues and handing it to Muddy Waters. All the research would tell you that Muddy Waters sang that song, but I was able to uncover a couple months ago that that's not the case. It was sung by Muddy's piano player. The reason being, Muddy never learned how to read. Without that blues memorized, he couldn't perform it. 1960 is a key moment, but so is 1964. I took 8 months finding this photograph of Langston Hughes with Nina Simone and the comedian Jeffrey Cambridge. When I founded the Smithsonian, I had to give them a soft apology. You have the wrong day, month, year, and place of this photograph. This photograph took place at the Sheraton Hotel Skylight Suites. You can see in the top corner if you're really kind of a safe, compulsive person like me. That's where it took place, and it was afterwards at the after party. Wouldn't you have liked to have been at the after party when Nina sang at Carnegie Hall, debuting her famous song about Mississippi? In 1965, Langston Hughes was personally invited to march at Selma by Martin Luther King. This is the Western Union telegram with that invitation, but he didn't go alone. The owner of the Village Vanguard in Greenwich Village, named Art DeLugoff, rented a plane, and he flew Nina, and he flew Art, and he flew people like Al, and he flew Langston Hughes down there personally to Selma to perform the last evening. Now, on the bottom right-hand corner, this is Nina performing. You all know the song. When it originally appeared, the last two words went on the radio as beep, beep. Nina is performing and singing, and instead of saying, Alabama's got me so upset, Tennessee made me lose my rest, she said, Alabama's got me so upset, Selma's made me lose my rest. According to Ambassador Andrew Young, she's told the show, why is the arrow here? When a camera flash went off, I said, I know that face. That is Coretta Scott King kneeling at Nina's knee, enamored with the performance. It's hard to see, but trust me. Langston Hughes died in 1967. When he did, Nina devoted her entire set at the Newport Jazz Festival as a tribute to Langston Hughes. Where does this research come from? I am fortunate enough at North Carolina State University to teach a course called Langston Hughes from the popular culture of the civil rights movement. And so undergraduate seniors and graduate students, masters and PhDs have contributed to the back and forth of my understanding of this. As you've already heard, if there's anything you missed tonight, you can simply go in your cursor and type in 2 words that are on the program, Backlash Blues, and all this is available in a digital project that features much of their work and a good deal of mine. And I am presently at the National Humanities Center writing a book, but you're not ready for the title, so that's why I had to get us warmed up. The title is Nina Simone and Langston Hughes, How the Singer and Poet Shaped the Soundtrack to the Civil Rights Movement. Yeah. If you're going to say soundtrack, you better have songs. So let's take a close look at some of the music. I want to form this in kind of 3 questions for us this evening. As you can imagine, an entire book, these 13 chapters, is a little too extensive for this section. But I want to highlight 3 questions that I think we can answer together, and I think they're formative for us. Number 1, how did that soundtrack get started? We've seen the friendship, the relationship, the support, the mentoring, but how did the soundtrack start? Finally, I think the second question for us should be, how did Nina Simone become the High Priestess of Soul? I've heard that label used to her. Where did it come from? How did it start? And how did it eventually stick? And finally, did Langston Hughes ever write a popular song? Did his poetry ever make it into music to be recorded and put in this particular way? We're going to start with that third question and we'll circle back to it. That was a joke on that. March 27, 1962, Langston Hughes had been collaborating with one of his favorite musicians of all time, Margaret Bonds. And they had worked out a song called Mary Had a Little Baby. That song was a part of a big piece called Ballad of the Brown King, which Langston Hughes dedicated to Martin Luther King after he returned with him on a trip from Nigeria in November of 1960. Langston Hughes wanted to mentor Nina, wanted to build a culture of community, wanted to give us this sense of Black world building, but he also secretly harbored a hope that maybe Nina would record one of his songs. You won't believe this, but since 1940, Langston Hughes wanted to record a popular song, and many of his songs had been recorded by Marian Anderson, by Duke Ellington. His most famous song came out in 1947 on the stage of Broadway. It was called Moon-Eyed Starry Face, and it was named the Song of the Season in Broadway in 1947. But he never bridged into popular music, and he wanted to. He'd never failed at anything when it came to writing, and so he thought he could do this. So on March 27, 1963, Margaret Bonds writes him a letter. At the end of the letter, in her hand, she creates a staff, and I'm so envious of you great music readers right now who can put notes to this. She wrote, Nina's going to have a little baby. Nina was pregnant, which would become Lisa. And then she said, but I hope she records Mary's babies first. Margaret and Langston were hoping that Nina Simone might actually record this song. They never did, and so Langston Hughes took a different tact. He said, well, what if I offer up some advice on a song that isn't necessarily one that I wrote, but one that I think is important? And so the first song Nina Simone ever recorded that was suggested by Langston Hughes is called Sea Line Woman. You'll be attentive to all the different spellings on this page. They're important to our explanation. Sea Line Woman was spelled Sea Line by Langston Hughes. Its probably most appropriate title is the one in green on the right, because it tells of women who do certain favors for men that they see coming in at the seashore, and the colored dress they wear suggests what kind of favors they're willing to do. But it also appeared several times as Sea Lion Woman, because in this song, the woman breaks men's days and empties their pockets. These women are empowered in a bizarre way, in kind of a turn on things. What you're looking at on the right is the single for Mississippi Goddamn. So many DJs were scared to say that last word and have it on their record table, turntables, that they produced a song that actually had the beep, beep right in it. But what's fascinating is when that song was released, the B-side was this song. It's very confusing to you that really know Nina's music, but that song was actually also recorded live March 21st, 1964 at Carnegie Hall. It was then had all the audience sound taken out of it in this particular way. So Sea Line Woman was the first song in early January of 1964 that Nina Simone performed based on Langston Hughes' recommendations. Now you're in for a real treat because something much more important happened after the start. Every month in 1964, Langston Hughes and Nina Simone were communicating with each other, either by phone or in person. And by the end of 1964, Langston Hughes had an idea. And he had a concept for the kind of song that Nina could perform. And so he gave her this document, Incantations for Nina Simone, songs of enticement, bewitchment, voodoo, hoodoo, conjuration, bedevilment, spellcasting, and incantation. So it's based on Hughes's favorite song that Simone performed from the Three Penny Opera from 1928 by Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill of Pirate Jenny. Jenny Diver, when she's introduced before she sings a song, is having a bitter dream. And it's a dream of vengeance and aggression. And Hughes liked the intensity of Simone's performance of this song. And so he asked himself, what else could she do? So this song list is only a partial one of the 22 songs he presented. Many of them are written by others, but Mojo Blues is one that he wrote himself. It was recorded by Big Miller in 1959, no relation. But But he suggested another song, You Cast a Spell on Me. And Nina said, I think I should be the one casting a spell. Wouldn't it be better if I was hypnotizing the audience? So she found a song by Screamin' Jay Hawkins in which he very much clowned at cosplay by getting all dressed up in native gear, wearing all kinds of bones through his nose and beating skulls and drums. And she toned it down, and she made it a serious engagement with these symbols and these tropes, as if, as my friend Naomi Andre has taught me, perhaps voodoo and hoodoo become a way to get to the authenticity of spirituality and the empowerment of it with all the complications of the inherited religions we sometimes have. It was a real thing. It was sincere and it was intense. Now, I'm wondering what might have happened in 1964. I mean, what would let Langston Hughes imagine that representations of conjuring should maybe be more noir than Nordic? Like every scholar that finds what they're looking for, I jumped up and down in my office when I put this together. September 17th, 1964, a new show had debuted on television. Elizabeth Montgomery was portraying somebody that was mischievous, right? That played little tricks on people. By the end of the season, it was the #2 show on network television. Was Langston Hughes saying, wouldn't it be interesting to have a black representation on screen, on stage, on vinyl? So here's what happened. Hughes provided lyrics that he had written, You Cast a Spell on Me. Simone said, no, I've already got a song. The lyrics are better than yours. I'm going to record I Put a Spell on You in January 1965. I'm going to release it as an album in January 65. It's going to be so successful, I'm going to get my first European tour out of it. And what's going to happen 2 years later when she moves from Philips Records to RCA is that the Philips people want to take one more stab at making money off of Nina. She recorded 29 albums between 1959 and 1974. And so they took all the songs that they left laying on the floor, the ones that weren't good enough to come out the first time, they threw them together and they said, she's mesmerizing, she's hypnotizing, she's bewitching. And so they put a label on her that had come out of nowhere. They called her the High Priestess of Soul. Now, I've been tracking the use of that phrase since 1905 to 1982. Here's the brief summary. Though Nina received that title in 1967, she had to fight for it for 10 years with another singer. I was stunned when I looked back at the actual record in Jet magazine and newspaper across the country. Aretha Franklin was also known as the High Priestess of Soul. I had to look 5, 10, 12 times to make sure my eyes weren't fooling me. The end of it goes like this. Aretha was never going to replace Dinah Washington, who was the queen. She wasn't going to step on those feet. There was another woman from Memphis named Carla Thomas, who was simultaneously known as the Queen of Memphis Soul and the Queen of Soul. But when Luther Vandross worked with Aretha in 1982 on the hit Jump to It, which was #1 on Billboard, Dinah was out of the picture, Carla was forgotten, and at that moment is the first time that Aretha actually became known as the Queen of Soul. And at that moment, it became sole possession of one Nina Simone. Let me be really clear on this. Every single description you see that Nina is a hypnotizing, mesmerizing performer comes from that Langston Hughes moment of meeting with her and giving her that concept that she could do this. There is nothing that appears ever in any place before that time at that moment of that image. And so we come to our final question, and I'm just excited for you as the music, so I'm going to keep moving along. Something else happens in 1966. There's a new phenomenon at work. It's the midterm elections, and people are talking about the white backlash. It's a term that was only invented just 2 years earlier. Backlash comes from the English concept of a factory belt that breaks and the machine, the systemic work involved breaks down. The word reverberation actually has its cues to a lash of a whip, not thunder or drums. So when a thing reverberates, it comes from this notion of lash. Candidates, I'm talking about 1966. Candidates were talking about pushing back against black power, about the idea that blacks could take control, could build off the 64 Civil Rights Bill, could build off the 1965 Voting Rights Act. And so white candidates came to the forefront. And if you know me really well, you know that I've talked a great deal about how that affected Raleigh on July 31st, 1966. One such candidate that arose was a B-list actor from California who wanted to run for governor. And I intentionally didn't highlight it on this page, but some of you have really good eyesight. Ronald Reagan came to the forefront, writing the power of the white backlash. The relationship with Nina Simone had rekindled in Hughes, as mentoring also did, this idea of a rekindled militant attitude. He'd always been militant, but he found it again in his very late years. And so he sat down, always responding to the news merely being the history we never forget. And he started writing something that looked like a song. He was calling it the Backlash Blues. And in this first draft, poets know drafts so very, very well, Mr. Backlash is a congressman. He's a person literally controlling political clout and activities. This is a photo of literally Nina recording Backlash Blues. This is the exact session where she recorded it. But Hughes has a song in mind. At the bottom, and I know it's a little bit difficult for you to see, the last stanza says, yeah, yeah, as if it would almost be enunciated on stage by somebody. But what actually happened is this. Langston Hughes said, I've tried writing this song stuff and it just doesn't work. I'm going to write a poem. So he wrote a poem called The Backlash Blues. He submitted it with 6 others to the crisis. And then at the last second, when it was truly a blues poem, he gave it to Nina and said, what do you think? And she said, that's it. The moment he stopped trying to write a song, he did. You can feel my bliss, can't you? Nina would record the Backlash Blues nonstop at her live concerts and perform them from 1967 to 1976. She says on the record, Nina Simone live at Berkeley, I played Backlash Blues already for you because I know you're going to request it anyway. She can't get off the stage without playing this song. It became linked to Langston Hughes' death. Though she recorded it before he died, the record didn't come out until after Langston Hughes died. And it became the final thing, the very final thing that he'd done. And it represented his entire life in these particular ways. The poem is couched in what? Mr. Backlash being a congressman. It's couched in Langston Hughes following only Stokely Carmichael and anticipating Martin Luther King and speaking out against the Vietnam War, something Langston Hughes did on February 15th at UCLA in 1967. We don't even think of Langston Hughes talking about the Vietnam War. He did quite assertively. And he asked the question, if I don't have anything to lose, how can I possibly leave the backlashers with the blues? Maybe he meant every time we win an election, they get the blues. Maybe he meant once you realize what's going on in Vietnam, that the world is big and bright and round, full of lots of people who are black, yellow, beige, and brown, that white supremacy would no longer be dominant. Or maybe it's just as simple as he understood the power of a metaphor. Metaphor is where memory breathes. And there would be an artistic statement forever of what the Backlashers tried to do when he wrote his poem and Nina sang it. I'm not sure any of those things happened, but let me tell you this. After 27 years, when Nina Simone finally performed and recorded Backlash Blues, his deepest desire, his most unfulfilled artistic moment had come true. Whether or not the Backlash Blues was something linked to Vietnam, voting, or metaphor, well, I'm just going to let you decide.
Mr. Backlash, just who do you think I am? You raise my taxes, freeze my wages, send my son to Vietnam. You give me second-class housing and second-class schools. Do you think all colored folk are just second-class fools? Mr. Backlash, I'm gonna leave you with the backlash blues. When I try to find a job to earn a little cash, all you got to offer is your mean old white backlash. But the world is big and bright and round, and it's filled with folks like me who are black, yellow, beige, and brown. It's the backlash. I'm gonna leave you with the backlash blues. Play it, y'all. Mr. Backlash, just what do you think I got to lose? I'm gonna leave you with the backlash blues. You're the one who had the blues, not me. Just wait and see. Thank you. We've got Carolyn Colquitt on piano. We've got Mr. Des Callis on guitar and the drum machine. And my name is Sandra Dubose, and I'm excited to be here and celebrate Nina's birthday with you. I put a spell on you.
Sandra Dubose, everyone. Carolyn Colquitt. Mr. Des Callis. I told y'all I get paid to bring you the best. Wow, talk about invoking the spirit and the essence of Nina Simone. Thank you. At this time, it is my honor to introduce to you, some of you, Jaki Shelton Green, North Carolina Poet Laureate, the first African-American woman to serve as Poet Laureate. In conversation with Dr. Jason Miller. And can we give a loud applause to Dr. Jason Miller for that presentation?
I don't know if y'all really want to invoke Nina up in here. Because she might have some questions for you. Yeah. Woo! So thank you. This is supposed to be what it is, a very scholarly, intellectual discourse, but we're going to move away from that for a little minute. From whence do I enter? First of all, thank you for your support. Thank you for receiving me as the first African-American Poet Laureate of North Carolina. Thank you for this walk with me. I will say that I am far more interested in just that one tag, though, as being the first African-American Poet Laureate of North Carolina. But it's one that I'm very humble and very grateful to execute. So thank you. Where do I enter in this conversation? As a child growing up in Orange County, in northern Orange County, in the 60s, and I remember the first time I heard Nina Simone and did not know the name associated with this person, with this personality, with somebody who actually would say Mississippi, goddamn, and live to tell it. Or the fact that she was saying to me to be young, gifted, and Black was enough. I'm reminded that Nina Simone taught us all that the writer, the artist must make art about the times that they live in, about the times that they live in. And she did that so courageously, and maybe a little stupidly, you know? I think that when we're artists, sometimes we don't know the great risks that we actually put ourselves in. But I am so grateful to Nina Simone. Nina Simone is definitely one of the winds that comes through my creative wellspring. But tonight, I'm really honored to say that in September, and I'm holding here, actually September 4th, I journeyed to Nina Simone's home place. And this original piece from her home place was gifted to me from the house. And not only was I there walking through that space and listening to the hushed stories inside of those floorboards and those rooms, that original beadboard, but also held Nina's ashes. And if that wasn't enough, I got to wear her white cloak. And if that wasn't enough, her sister showed up and talked to us until the wee hours of the morning. And my dear friend knows something about that sister. So I'm really, really honored to be in this space with you, Jason, I feel like my life has come full circle a little bit as a little brown girl from Northern Orange County who was thinking about what it means to be a writer writing in the times that she lives in, and thinking about how Nina taught us that truth-telling was dangerous, very dangerous. So Jason, I have questions. I have a lot of questions, but I'm very honored by this work that you're doing, but more importantly for me as a documentary poet and a documentarian, I always want to know, why are you doing this? Like, what brings you to do? That's far more important to me. Like, the book is important, yeah, but I really want to know, why you? And I know that sometimes the work chooses us. We don't choose the work, that the work chooses us. So I would really like for you to talk a little bit about, why are you doing this to start with?
First of all, this is just an incredible honor for me. If I can steal this back for you. This is an incredible honor for me to be here with you. Thank you so much for sharing this space and bringing your expertise. And once you mentioned that white cloak, I knew exactly the one you were talking about. And so this is what envy looks like. My work really starts with my passion for Langston Hughes' work. And I taught high school English for 5 years, and I was the teacher that thought he was really cool because he'd bring in his custom-made electric guitar and plays blues songs and show the students that Langston Hughes' songs were blues poems. When I decided to go back to graduate school, a new anthology had come out. It showed me a Langston Hughes I'd never met before. Carrie Nelson's groundbreaking anthology included, of American poets, more poems by Langston Hughes than any other poet in America. He felt Hughes deserved to be represented more than Emily Dickinson, Robert Frost, Walt Whitman. And he showed me a side of Hughes that I'd never seen before. And so when I started looking at a poet I thought I knew and then realized I didn't, I said to myself, I know there's a number of other people that don't know this work either. What kept me going is that I got to meet an incredibly generous, loving, kind person. And you don't always get that lucky when you're doing research to find a subject you really care about. You know, sometimes you can finally figure out who Hannah Crafts is, and I don't know how you might feel about that person. But I knew exactly how I felt about Langston Hughes. So I started this work 22 years ago, and I have the same piece of wood from Langston Hughes' house in Harlem. So what we should have done, Jaki, is brought them out there and bring them together. I don't want to avoid your question. When I was promoting my recent Langston Hughes biography, I launched it in Washington, D.C. at Busboy and Poets. And I told a story about Langston Hughes being there in Washington, D.C., working as a busboy at the Wardman Park Hotel. So when I came to Raleigh, I said, let's tell a local story. Let's tell the people something about Langston Hughes in North Carolina. And so I spoke to a group of people, not quite this big, and I said to them, you know, Nina was a friend to all kinds of people. He was mentoring Eartha Kitt. He was working with Odetta in summers. He spent time with Josephine Baker. He went to Ada Bricktop Smith's house in Rome in the summers. But when he got a call and someone said, hey, would you mind putting some liner notes on an album? Langston said, yes, I'd be happy to, Nina. And the entire audience gasped. And I realized that even after 22 years, I had overlooked Hughes's role as a mentor. I went back to all 7 biographies, one written by me, and I'd found that there was only one substantive sentence about Langston Hughes' relationship with Nina Simone. I said, we have a massive gap in the scholarship. Musicians know it, poets know it, but scholars had missed it. And so that safe compulsion to finish that story kept propelling itself forward.
Wow, thank you. So it brings us to, I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the political, cultural, and social background, that milieu that would even create a landscape for them to collaborate together. Because Nina was difficult. Langston had some issues. Langston was difficult. You know, he and Zora, well, we ain't gonna go there. But yeah, let's talk about that. Is what was the breeding ground for that collaboration, for that artistic collaboration?
Well, if we start on the Hughes side, we see that Langston Hughes, to my stunned surprise, and I went back to the archive for the fourth time back in August, I realized that Langston Hughes is spending more time with musicians than he was writers in the 1960s. He brought gospel music to the stage. He was working with all those people we just mentioned, as well as many others, and he was fascinated by music itself, living with Toy Harper, an accomplished musician, and Emerson, an incredible saxophone player. In many ways, he felt like music was something he should know even more about. So Hughes sought out, as kind of a key figure in the culture, other people to encourage, to mentor. He was more proud than anyone that he had published Alice Walker's first story. He loved giving back to others. He knew that role that we all know in the mentor-mentee relationship. So it starts there, and then it continues with this notion of him having this strange political clout of being at places like the Newport Jazz Festival, being invited to the White House with J.F. Kennedy so he can make plans. Simone's relationship is so fascinating because I think many of us have this image of her. We didn't see a lot of them tonight, right? Of the amazing clothing she would wear, the incredible hairstyles. And yet that was a long development of movement in these particular ways. So I think of the 1960s, and for me, it's a season by season event. I am consistently stunned how different things are in April of 1966 than they are in July of 1966, when on June 16th, 1966, down in Mississippi, Stokely Carmichael says, "Black Power, the landscape shifts that quickly." So these are sands for them that are always moving. And negotiating that became, I think, a very key moment for each of them. Nina, I think, had great admiration for Hughes as somebody that understood music. The more interesting thing, I think, is why did Hughes really recognize Nina right away? And I'll defer to you on this, but my feeling is that great recognizes great, right?
Yeah, well, I want to go back to when she was 16, because I think about what it must have meant for this young Black girl in Asheville, North Carolina, to actually not only invite Hughes, but he came. And I think about, and by no means am I lauding myself in the same circle as Langston Hughes or great writers like them. But I do think about what it must mean sometimes when the poet laureate, the Black poet laureate, the poet laureate who happens to be Black, is there with that 8th grader or that 6th grader, and they are seen, they are heard, and I look like them. Yeah, so representation does matter, supremely matters. And when I think about representation, I also think about the commodification of Nina Simone's greatness. And Nina Simone's, that the High Priestess title, I get a little twitchy because it still goes back to who gets to name. Who gets to name you, who gets to sort of invite you into that circle of fame. So for Langston Hughes to have met her as a child, and then just a few years later, he's inviting her for dinner as a peer, as a colleague, as an artist. So many questions for what did that mean to Nina Simone? We know who he was as a mentor, but what it meant to be seen. For all of her greatness, she was also misunderstood quite a bit. And people were very confused about Nina quite a bit. But would you talk a little bit about kind of the poetic reimagination for both of them in the making of the Backlash Blues? Because I think they both became the poets and they both became the musicians, and what it meant to exchange positions and to trust each other.
Couldn't imagine a better way to think of their collaboration on this poem. When Hughes gives it to Simone, she does record the version almost consistently, but then a number of things start enacting a change in the song. The first and foremost being that Langston Hughes dies and Nina is performing this live. And when she reaches the end of the song, the audience isn't ready for the song to be over. So she starts extending the song. The best version of this I've found at the Library of Congress. It's from July of 1967. Nina performed the song before the Newport Jazz Festival, before the song had been released. And you can hear an audience react to a song they've never heard before. They gasp between verses. Did she just say Vietnam? Did she just say she's going to pay him back? And so Nina starts extending the song. The most beautiful episodes of this are easily accessible on April 7th, 1968, when she is there 3 days after Dr. King's assassination, not only recording Why the King of Love is Dead, but doing a long version of Backlash Blues where she inserts new lines in the middle of it. And at the bridge, she says, when Langston Hughes died, he told me many years before, Nina, keep on working till they open up the door. One of these days, when the door is open wide, make sure you show them where it's at so they have no place to hide. Now, if you've been fortunate enough to see the Summer of Soul, you know that Nina also performed that same version in the heart of Harlem, 1969, except she said, sock it to him. So Nina took the concept, made it her own, and absolutely is a co-author, just as she wrote Mississippi Goddamn, just as she worked 3 years to write 4 Women, and she deserves that writing credit she has on that.
Yeah, the sock it to him, which you don't expect to hear from Langston Hughes, a man of letters. But I have another question about what were some contradictions or some surprises or some historical primary sources that surprised you? I'm fascinated as a documentarian who uses a lot of primary and secondary sources and poetics. Talk a little bit about, what did you dig up? What did you uncover that was kind of like, oh?
I'll edit myself here.
Please, sir.
One of my star students took to Nina's visit with Langston in Nashville in 1949, and she found one of Nina's 91-year-old roommates still alive and active and fully cognizant in Michigan. After my graduate seminar, she drove all the way up there to interview this woman, and I have been able to keep in contact with her because of that. She coordinated with me and started remembering songs that Nina was playing when she was 16. And she said there was one we always played on Glee Club trips. It was called Mighty. Yeah, I'm going to say it. My wife always gets mad at me if I don't tell these things. I'm just going to tell it. She said that Nina used to perform this song on Glee Club trips called Mighty Like a Rose. She said, I've never heard that song. I looked at the lyrics, but on my commute daily from Raleigh over there, I've listened to every single Nina Simone song that exists twice. And lo and behold, one day, I heard in the middle of a song that's called Hush Little Baby, Nina formed a medley and put Mighty Like a Rose in it. Why is that important? I was listening to the kind of song Nina would have played when she was 16 when Langston Hughes walked into that auditorium for the evening event. He did 3 events that evening in Asheville. And I could actually listen to, this is a song Nina might have played when Langston was there. And so that was one of many things that kind of popped up in this particular regard. In terms of others, I'm quite stunned by the friendship aspect here. So even when we listen to a song like 4 Women, which is Nina's song, period, she kind of annotates the song. Scholars, poets, we understand this kind of annotation. When she performs it in 1973 at Berkeley, she does a 9-minute version, and she introduces the first character, Aunt Sarah, as somebody who works in Harlem. I'd never heard that from her before. When she gets to the third character, Sweet Thing, she says she's walking the streets of 125th and Lenox. Isn't it startling to consider Nina living in Mount Vernon, because New York is a big place, Tricia, living in Mount Vernon, performing in Greenwich Village, and going through Harlem most often to see Langston Hughes, thinking about the women of those streets when she composed and created that song. So little things like that, just touches and flourishes of their relationship. I'll stop there.
No, please don't. Please don't stop. Don't stop. Yeah, go. I know you have more to say. Please go.
One heartfelt thing.
Speak.
Thank you. One very heartfelt thing, and this letter isn't unknown. The great Nadine Cohodes, in her 2010 book, The Princess Noir, talks about this letter. But when Nina is overseas in July 6th, 1965, Lorraine Hansberry has died earlier on January 12th, and Langston Hughes is now her closest friend in the world. And she writes a 5-page letter to Langston Hughes, pouring out her heart to him about how she's reading all his books and is his biggest fan and absolutely loves and admires his work. And to kind of have a document like that in which you're able to see that, you know, this wasn't just about making songs, it wasn't just about doing a concert, right? It's the things you do when you support young writers all around our state. It's having connection, and it's having a person you can go to and share things with. That letter is so heartfelt and personal. And for me to think about the idea that of all the people in Nina's orbit, she chose to open up her heart to dearest Langston, that she wrote, very, very powerful.
Thank you. And I think this is so important because when we think about the relationships between very famous and celebrated people and emerging artists, there's such a void and there's such a chasm and a disconnect. Very intentional disconnects. So I am very grateful for the scholarship because I think what it does is it exemplifies and provides a model for what that can look like. What that each one teach one, each one reach one can look like. And especially in times right now, in these times, which brings me to this next question about scholarship and your mission. You know, the mission for this book now in these crucial American times, now when the voices of Nina and Langston would be erased in many states in this country. Now. So let's talk about the urgency and the agency that the scholarship will provide.
And for me, that is as intense as it's ever been during my time as a professional academic. And it's startling. I used to, in my classroom, I see many students here have to reference things that were decades old to get them to understand. Now when I talk about Langston Hughes appearing before the House Senate Committee, before Joseph McCarthy, they're like, well, sure, we get that. We see that all the time. Right now is an incredibly important moment for talking about these kind of relationships, this kind of work, because we are at a crossroads in time where we need to remind everybody that this history isn't going anywhere. You can do a lot of things to try to silence it. You can try to do a lot of things to discredit it. The history is the history, the art is the art, and the love is the love, and it's not going to be silenced in any particular way.
The Right Reverend Dr. Jason Miller said of thou. Well, we don't want to keep you all night. I think it's time now to, yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, we are totally open to, I'm totally open to passing the mic to Dr. Miller for any questions you have for him.
I actually have a question for you. Thank you so much. You are an inspiration for Black women, Black scholars. Thank you. I love you. I want you to expand a little bit about what you said about Nina Simone being misunderstood. Because I think that for women like me of this age, I very much like connect to her. So it's like, well, am I misunderstood? Like, so can you say just a little bit more about what you mean?
I remember during the 60s and 70s when, her music was on fire, she was a badass. I mean, she was saying things that Sarah Vaughan and Donna Ross wasn't saying that stuff, and people were being behaved because people wanted money and people wanted record labels. And Nina kind of twisted that. So when I say, she was misunderstood, I don't think we were ready for Nina Simone. That's more what I meant, is people really weren't ready, but she made us ready. Or she created a landscape where many of us who did not know how not to whisper. Nina gave us permission that we didn't have to whisper. Or how black folk would be talking about race, they'd be like, what you whispering for? Well, these things we don't say out loud. Nina was saying them out loud. So that's what I meant about being misunderstood. It was like, it was basically, who that? Who is that? Who is this woman? And who is this woman in her interviews that was telling America to really look at itself? Who had the audacity to say, not my country. Nina was a truth teller, and she taught us that. She taught us that not just in her music, but how she showed up in her humanity. And I remember, the conversations between she and James Baldwin, and they coming back for King's funeral together. So the time was a different time, but we're at this time again. We really didn't go anywhere. We're right here. Just different players, different gatekeepers, but we are right here now. And that may or may not have answered your question.
I have a question too. Can you talk about, we all acknowledge the bravery, how brave it was for her to step out and be one of the ones to tell the truth. But can you talk about what it cost her in terms of how it impacted her career, right? And the other part of that, can you talk about how I find, when we look back now in retrospect, she's iconic and we get it. But back then, it's like she's a star and she's all of these things now after she's gone. But how were we treating her? How was she received in that present time?
Yeah, and I wanted you to talk about that too, since you're doing a lot of the scholarship. But, I think about her mental illness and her health. And I was sitting here thinking about the number of those albums that she made in that very short, those few years. How, and I just sat there and I cringed. Like she became this machine for the industry also. But I want you to answer that.
Nina made this mistake that so many musicians make their first recording contract. She gave away the rights to her music. That's not unusual, but it affected her. However, she made one choice, which speaks to everything Jaki was saying so eloquently. She said, I will arrange and have final say over the songs I produce. So that's part of the way to understand the initial tension. She's going to lose the royalties, but her music is going to be hers. And you can listen to outtakes and she gets halfway through, I'm not doing the song. And that was it. There was no back and forth between the producer, okay? Now what happens is Nina's trajectory is a lot like a sound wave. In the 1960, there are two men, their first year in school at Howard University, and they're listening to Nina obsessively. Their names are Andrew Young and Stokely Carmichael. Those records were spinning in civil rights circles. And I don't know if Everett Ward is here tonight, but there are lots that Dr. Ward has shared so eloquently as many others. If you were a civil rights staffer, worker, veteran, Nina Simone was in your house. You would fight when those records were stolen, okay? So there's that part of it. So Nina sold enough records, performed enough to make the money that initial contract cost her. The fight came to a head. There were many iterations throughout, but in 1987, this little perfume company in Paris put the song "My Baby Just Cares for Me" in one of its Chanel No. 5 commercials. Nina had to watch why that $1 million organization and entity used the song she'd signed away back in 1958. She eventually won a great deal of those royalties back, but the cost was extensive. And I think the metaphor is she felt like a workhorse. And that's the way her mother would describe it in the Legend film from the 1990s, that they just worked her nonstop in this particular regard. So a lot of all that at once in this particular way. And I think it cost her substantively when she finally said, "I'm going to Liberia." And so you see her die overseas, and fortunately those ashes have come back to us. It's a long, hard road.
Yes. I don't even know if it's on. It is on. I guess, wanted to make a comment, Jaki, when you mentioned young, gifted, and Black, to be young, gifted, and Black. It's bringing me to tears because I can remember I was a child in Jamaica when I first heard that song. And even in a country where people from the African diaspora were the majority, there was still so much classism and racism in that country, in my country. And when I heard that song, it just always made me stand up straighter. And so these things just matter. All these little children all over, and still, my children who hear this music, it's so powerful. So I just really want to acknowledge Ms. Simone and thank her for her bravery and her inability to be silent. I just want to honor her on her birthday for that.
Are there any other questions with all of this scholarship and brilliance? There we are.
I'm just going to respond just to say that Nina Simone saw the children and knew that they were at the core and at the center of everything that was happening. And even now when I hear that song, there's something about the discord of it, the dissonance and discord of it. Those fragments just are very visceral. And I think at that time we needed to hear that. That and Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Between James Brown and Nina Simone, I got a new life in the 60s. We started seeing ourselves very, very differently. So happy birthday, Nina. I know there's another question.
Thank you for that, injecting that James Brown. He's my homeboy. But I think there's a lot to unpack to what was talked about and what was presented. And I would like to go back to Jaki's original question to you, Jason. And I would like to go back a little further. Then, because it had to be something, because we both are at NC State, right? So there's something other than you were in graduate school that got you connected to these topics. And I'd like to know what that is, because, and I'm speaking honestly, right? As a white male, and Nina exemplifies everything that we talked about, the challenges that Black women, intersectionality, has invoked, and how we are seen, and how we are silenced, how we are erased, and how we are appropriated. So I'd like to just unpack that question a little bit more for me. How did you reach? Yeah.
I'm the son of a single mother who was never home, and I'm an only child. I watched my mother leave the house at 4 o'clock in the morning. I saw her come home at 6 o'clock and go to bed at 8 o'clock. I had the utmost respect for my mom because she's an amazing woman, and I saw firsthand her dedication and her commitment. The way that she instructed me is too personal for me to share in a public moment. And it's really personal. The relationships that I had, what that home looked like in its makeup. But I can tell you that I am a scholar of 20th century American poetry, and I am only interested in America's signature form of artistic expression, and that is blues, jazz, music, and poetry.
I'm really glad that she went back to that question, and I'm enjoying tonight. But when you originally said, Ms. Shelton, that she was misunderstood, I too had a question about that, because the way you were talking about it, today's misunderstood for women of color gives it so many other adjectives to go along with it. Evil, angry, and I just want to know how she was able to maintain and contain all of that within herself and still keep her mind.
Because I think she knew who she was. And I think she exemplified that when she was a child prodigy and white people showed up to hear her sing, but her parents could not sit in the front row. And she said, "I will not play until you seek my family." So I think that she was real clear on who she was. She was real clear on wanting to be a classical musician first. That was where she was. She was a classical musician. And she was clear on her direction and what was going to feed her to get there. And I think that she fed off being difficult. I do. You know, people tell you extra, you like, yep. You know, not to be funny or evasive, but there's some medicine there. And we get that medicine from being in Black communities and seeing those women who are the others, who are the different ones. You know, she a little extra. She think a little different. She move a little different. You know, she don't quite get it the way we get it. But she got it. So I wasn't using that word disparagingly, but more of what it means to be a creative maker in places where people don't understand what creative making looks like, or what the creative genius looks like, who does the same things you do every day. And yet they make music, they create masterpieces. But I think it was all about she and all of her music helped us understand not only was she clear on who she was, but who we were. And how we mattered to her and to each other. And I think there's a lot to be said to that now when we think about, you know, what musicians are helping us to matter to each other. You know, in my documentary poetry class at Duke a lot, I ask my students, you know, when do you leave money on the table? You know, as an artist, as a musician, as a writer, when do you leave money on the table? We were talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce and the Blood Diamonds, you know, and Cartier and Tiffany. When do you leave money on the table? And I think Nina Simone kind of gave us some of those lessons. And that was different. You know, she said, "I'm not gonna grovel." She worked hard, but she was like not on the floor groveling. And that was the difference. That was the being misunderstood, I think, if that makes sense.
Jaki, before we take this next question, you asked for a graphic that we have behind you. Can you describe what that is, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to share this. When I was sitting in Chris Ambrose's house in, what's the name of it? Tryon. I can never remember Tryon. Up in Tryon, he came to me with this, and you know this framed photograph but his frame type letter. This is Langston Hughes from Langston Hughes Typewriter, and that's his green ink at the top. And this is what we both have been able to hold in our hands, the article that he wrote for the Chicago Defender. So Chris sent it to me last night. We just wanted to share it as a primary source that I know that you've worked with a lot.
Final question. Misunderstood by whom? Because I think she was inspirational for many. She was definitely the soundtrack of the movement. As said earlier, in the dormitories, in the meeting halls, in the kitchen tables around this country, where we met, where we strategized, it was Nina Simone that was the soundtrack that kept us moving and kept us engaged. So I think all in all, her job is done because I am a product of her inspiration. You're a product of her inspiration. So many of us who came up in the 60s and the 70s, we got her orders. And her order was to go out and make this world better for those behind us, our children and our children's children. So Nina Simone, you are definitely the High Priestess of Soul. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we thank Jaki Shelton Green, North Carolina Poet Laureate, and Dr. Jason Miller, National Humanities Center Fellow. What a wonderful conversation. So we're going to end this evening in song, and I know enough not to follow that which is coming up next. I will say two things. Sandra Dubose, we need a night with Nina featuring you.
We can totally make that happen.
So have your people call my people.
I'll have your people.
Will you all come to a night with Nina featuring? So there are three things I want to say. First, I have themed our entire season Esse Quam Videre, which is North Carolina State's motto, which is to be rather than to seem to be. If you get a personal email from me, I sign it off, Esse Quam Videre. And I think on her birthday, there are some artists that seem to be something that they're not, but I think when you look at the life and the music and the challenges and the sacrifices of Nina Simone, we get a chance to honor an artist who absolutely was everything that she said that she was, that she envisioned that she was, even at the price of fame. I also would like to say, I guide myself every morning by two principles. One, never stop astounding yourself. And then I ask myself a question with everything that I produce here. What will it look like when it has been done well? Dr. Jason Miller, Sandra Dubose, Carolyn Colquitt, Des Callis. I will say it has been done well. And with that, we leave you in the hands of Sandra Dubose. Thank you. Have a great night.
Wow. Has this been an incredible night already? Learned so much, so inspired. This has been so much fun for me to be able to sing Nina's music. I've always been a fan, but when I was tasked with this assignment, I had an opportunity to kind of go down a rabbit hole of Nina Simone and found songs that I'd never even heard of before. And so I'm just really excited to be able to sing some of those songs for you tonight. So enjoy. I'm going to tell you right now about the Sea Lion Woman. Y'all want to know about the Sea Lion Woman? I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Yeah, turn that up, turn that up. I need that drum beat right there. Yeah. up too. I need to feel that right there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Listen, feline woman, she drink coffee, she drink tea, and then go home. Feline woman, dressed in green, wear silk stockings with golden seams. Feline woman, dressed in red, make a man lose his head. Feline woman, black dress on for $1,000. She wail and she moans. Feline woman, wiggle, purr like a cat, wink at a man and he wink back now. Feline. Empty his pockets and wreck his days. Make him love her, she fly away. Feline woman. Come on, y'all. When I heard this song, I loved it because, you know, it's the softer side. We all know Nina Simone to be tough and fearless and bold, but this song was so vulnerable, and it allowed me to see her womanness, that just like any other woman desiring the touch and the love of a man. So this one is called I Need a Little Sugar in My Bowl. I can relate. I need a little sugar in my bowl. I want a little sweetness down in my soul. I could stand some loving, oh so bad.
little sugar in your bowl, a little steam on your clothes. I understood that. We all need that. Even the brave ones, even the ones that step out and are tough, we all have a softer side. And I think that's the part that we need to appreciate her as a full woman in all of the many ways that she was a complicated melody. And this last song is a song, and we talked a lot about that tonight, is she said, don't let me be misunderstood. And many said she was misunderstood, but that was her heart's desire with all of the complexities of being human, whether it's mental health issues, the times that we're living in, to be the one who is called and charged to be a leader, and as an artist to speak out when you can't do what everybody else does, because you know that you're the one that's been called to make the difference, so that even on your 90th birthday, when you're no longer here, that we're still talking about your legacy. So, we love you, Nina. We understand you. Baby, you understand me now. And yet sometimes you see that I'm mad. Don't you know no one alive can always be an angel? When everything goes wrong, you'll see some bad. But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood. You know, baby, sometimes I'm so carefree.
you so much. We love you, Nina. Dr. Jason Miller, thank you. Jaki, Shelton Green, we love you so much. Moses, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Good night, everyone. Consider becoming a member of North Carolina Museum of Art. Thank you for being here. Happy birthday, Nina.